Hey everyone, this is a quick tips video to talk about how to manage your references for the paper you have due, and sort of how to keep things organized and set up really well so that when it comes time to cite your papers, you're ready to cite them and the process is as simple and painless as possible. So this is going to build off of a lot of things I talked about in the primary research literature video from a while ago. If you need to track that down, you can look at that through my YouTube channel. And so this assumes that you're already very comfortable with the process of finding primary research articles. And I'm just going to show you some things that I do to keep things organized for myself. So the first thing is, right now what you're looking at is a directory on my computer that I have called PDFs. And basically every primary research article that I have gathered up, I keep in my own personal library in this PDF folder. So as you can see, there are a lot of papers in this folder as a result of having written a lot of papers on a lot of different topics over the years. And I have a very basic organizational system here. What I've done is I've organized these by the first author's last name. And then in some cases, if there are two authors, I'll put both author names. So this Bleakley and Brody, for example. Then the year the paper was published, and then I try to put in a couple of keywords for myself so that it's a little bit easier for me to go back and retrieve an article when I'm looking for it. But obviously, this is not very helpful if I'm working on writing a paper about, for example, ice cream flavors, and I want to track down specific references associated with some aspect of that project. So that's not all that I have. I've showed you previously, I also keep copies of references in Zotero, and I can add things very easily to this using the plugin that works with, in my case, works with Firefox. And so we're just going to go back over to the library, and if you're on campus, it's very easy to get here. If you're off campus, you can get to Google Scholar through, that's probably under G. Google Scholar through the library website. There will be a login prompt, but that gives you access to everything as if you were also on campus. So if we just look for, here's Google Scholar. And let's say I want to look up something about ice cream, so maybe ice cream flavors. And so here's a series of articles that I'm interested in, and again I can just click on this, use an import function to import that citation into Zotero. And then kind of the question is, well, what comes next after that? So I'm just going to show you what I do to try and keep references organized for a given project. And you can use this system or you can develop your own system as well. So let's say this first article looks good. I'm going to import that reference. It is going to pop into Zotero. So you'll notice here it is appearing in Zotero. And then if I'm working on a project on this topic, what I like to do is I'm going to use the Zotero function to create a bibliography from this item. And in this case, I'm going to use a citation format used for the journal Functional Ecology. Another one that works really well for SciWriting is this format for plant physiology. In my case, I'm going to copy that to the clipboard, and then I use a very fancy type of file known as a text file to keep my references organized. So I can just paste that citation into this text file. Then when it comes time to actually read that article, in this case, if I am working with this article for a paper, I'm going to read it a little bit differently than I might read if I'm trying to extract every detail from that article. And specifically, I'm going to be reading with an agenda. I'm going to be going in and saying, okay, I'm looking for references, that help me make some argument about how milk fat contributes to ice cream flavor. So this fits very nicely into that because this looks like it's all about the properties of ice creams that have milk fat or fat replacers. So when I open up this PDF, in this case I'll download the article. This works fine for reading through the PDF. I'm probably most interested in this case in, okay, what do these guys actually use? So I might give myself some notes about treatment groups used, might be just skimming this very, very quickly. We've got fat replacers, looks like whey protein proprietary. Then there's something called dairy low, pro low, and simplease. It's kind of weird names. And then there's a non-dairy mix, and then a full fat mix. Also included things like sugar, corn syrup. You get the idea. So, I might take some notes about that, and I might be really interested in kind of the major finding. So, just here looking at the abstract quickly. Any of the replacers, no effect on vanillin flavor, but changes to other aspects of ice cream flavor. Okay, so I might also have something like questions left from this. What about some other replacement type? Who knows? But the main point here is whatever notes I'm taking in this file are my notes specifically for my agenda for this paper. So in this case, my agenda is make sure I know enough about this paper so that I can intelligently cite it when I'm writing about my ice cream experiment. So often what I'll do is I'll just organize a set of references alphabetically, or I might organize those references by theme instead. So let's come back over here, and I've got actually another subfolder in here. It's not going to come up easily. Let's go back over here. So I've got another subfolder here that has a huge collection of text files that contain a whole series of annotated bibliographies on different topics for different projects that I've worked on. So I've talked a little bit about an ant experiment that I conducted, and in this case, so you can see, my citations that I'm working with, and in this case I've kind of organized them by theme. Sometimes I'll organize them chronologically, sort of depending on what I'm trying to cover, and for these research projects, a number of the papers are in the same study system, so I've got everything that we have published about that study system and other people as well in one section, and then I've got things on other species and kind of some of the bigger ideas in another section. And in different cases, I might note something like, okay, this is a review paper. It's not a primary research article. So, I will probably work with a review paper a little bit differently than I would a primary research article. Okay, so this is basically, and you can see also here I've alphabetized a lot of the references, but making this type of annotated bibliography, you can organize it however you want. Whatever gets the job done at the end of the day, that's your goal. Keeping in mind that for your paper you're going to need to have a minimum of 10 primary research articles cited. You can cite more than that, and you can also cite other types of references, but those other types will not count towards those 10. Okay, so here's a set of citations. I have a couple of other little annotations that I've started using. One of those is if I've read something through pretty thoroughly, I'll put an asterisk in front of it. You'll also see that here I have some notes to myself that I need to read some things more carefully, so I just put the citations into this file, and then I'll come back to those when I'm working on this project, and I'll work on reading through those papers as part of my writing process. I also wound up developing a method of just putting an X in front of something. If, at first when I was reading it, I went, ooh, that sounds great. And then later on I came back and I was like, oh no, this paper, they did a poor job setting up their experiment. It's not relevant, X, Y, Z. So that's what earns something an X. And oftentimes I'll just stick a bunch of those down at the bottom of one of these files so that I know that I've looked at it and that I've already excluded it from what I'm considering. So then when I'm actually working on writing a paper, what I will do is, let's see if I have some examples on here. So let's see. Here's an older paper, right? So I've got a whole bunch of files for this, and here's a draft of a manuscript that's in progress. and I'm collaborating with a couple of other people on this. So we've got some notes to each other about who's done the last round of edits on this paper. And often what we will do is, as we're writing our introduction or our discussion, so here I've used just track changes to give some feedback to one of my co-authors. And let's say that I know I need some references somewhere in the paper, but I'm not quite sure what those references are. Oftentimes, as I am typing, I will just put something in that says ref as a reminder to myself to come back later and look up references on that particular topic. Another thing I wanted to highlight here is just to show you a little bit more about how those citations get worked into a paper. So in this case, this introduction here starts out with a very general statement. So group size has profound effects on the structure and function of cooperative social groups. So this, broadly speaking, this manuscript that we're working on is about group size, right? So it comes in that first sentence. And what you'll notice is we have a lot of references to support this statement. So part of what that says is, oh wow, okay, yeah, a lot of people have been studying this and it's a really interesting question and phenomenon to study. Within the parentheses here, you can see a couple different things. In this case, where there's a paper where there are more than 2 authors, we've actually included all the author names as kind of an intermediate step. What is more common is to see if there are just 2 authors, you'd include both author last names, so it'd be Aviles and Abbott, and then the year, and then separated by a semicolon here. In this particular case, these references right now are currently organized alphabetically by the author last name, so we've got Aviles and Tufino, Brahma, Dornhaus, etc. An alternate arrangement you might see for something like this is for everything to be in chronological order. So we might start with 1998 and then we might wind up with 2019 as our last reference. Along with that, once this is closer to being ready to publish, we would probably replace this Aviles, Abbott, and Cutter with Aviles et al., which is Latin for and others. And so that kind of helps to condense some of the text so we're not just reading giant lists of people's names all the time. And the third thing I want to point out here is we also have an example of a paper with a single author, so it's just that single author's name and the year. For this particular manuscript, there's a comma between. For your papers, you just want last name, year, comma. Last name, year, comma, etc., within parentheses. And the last thing you'll notice here, and that you probably already noticed in your own primary research articles, is that yes, there are citations for just about every single sentence, especially in this first paragraph. So, I'm not requiring the same level of depth for your papers this semester, in part because it takes a lot of work to incorporate this many citations into a paper, but this should give you an idea of kind of what you're working towards. I'm also going to point out a couple of formatting elements. When you turn in your final paper, you're going to want to include line numbers. It's a little cumbersome to do that with Google Docs, so that may involve a few changes. A couple of other things you'll see here. So in this case, we don't at this point, but we should actually have the title and authors on a title page. As a working document, we've got an extra highlight section here that wouldn't wind up going with the final paper. After that, we've got the abstract. And again, you don't need to write an abstract, but usually the abstract goes on its own page. And then we'll have things divided up into the sections of the paper. So introduction first, starting on its own page. Then we've got materials and methods, and for materials and methods, all you need is a line break, and then you can start continuously on the same page with your materials and methods. We've got subsections here, and then same thing with the written results, right? So you can just do line break, then your written results, and again, we've got different subsections for our written results and sub-subsections, and same thing for your discussion. So line break, discussion. We also have page numbers to help navigate through this document, because as you can see, this is a pretty long document. And then after the discussion, there's a page break, and the next section that we have here is our references section. So this is where the full citation will go in the paper alphabetized in this case, and in chronological order typically after alphabetization. And again, if you use Zotero, Zotero will get you about 95% of the way there for your final citation format. You'll still need to read through your references to proofread and just check any little quirks or things that aren't italicized that should be, but that should save you a lot of the tedious labor of typing everything in as it needs to be. In this case, we don't have it, but within the same document, but for your papers, what you would next want is a page break, and then your figures will appear at the end of your full document. Okay, so hopefully these are some really helpful quick tips that will help you make progress through some of the final stages of assembling your full paper and your full draft for a grade. And again, I'm not requiring you to use these organizational techniques to keep track of your references, but I found that over the years, this is one of the best methods for me personally for keeping a huge amount of information easily organized and easy to access, and it has saved me a lot of time in the long run doing this. So hopefully you'll find that the same to be true.